This show is a production of the Best in Tabletop Network. Be your best in every aspect of your game. Find us wherever you find your podcasts, or check us out on YouTube for more Bat Reps podcasts and shows. If you like what we're doing, you can join our Discord through the Best in Tabletop Patreon group, or our YouTube members only area where you'll get access to our entire library of content. Thank you for listening. Welcome to Best in Faction,
podcast about playing Warhammer 40k
competitively. I'm Colin.
I'm Mitch.
I'm Chuck.
And we also have the Stats Dad with us today. Hi, Nathan. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Hello, everyone.
Excellent. So we have Nathan Henning joining us from Stat Check, formerly Fight Club. I'm going to call them like the cousin of the network. They came from the family of the network, but now they're like off doing their own thing. So
they moved off to university, and we don't take kindly to that.
Yeah. So, but we're still big proponents of those guys. So before we dive into the show, Nathan, why don't you tell them what Stat Check is and how it's different from Fight Club?
Sure. So at Stat Check, we are really more interested in just tracking everything from a numbers perspective, and then adding in two of the top players from basically 40k currently, which is Anthony and Ennis, and bringing their perspective to the numbers as well, so that they can break down all of the meta analysis on our show. So that's every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, 6 p.m. Eastern, and then some ungodly hour in the UK when Ennis hosts. Otherwise, we also maintain the meta dashboard, where we track basically the progression of the meta, and that's all curated by Cliff. And then Curie curates our weekly tournament data with some assistance from me for our overrep data. Basically, we're trying to make a large stats resource for 40k with some analysis to go hand in hand with it at the moment.
Wonderful. Where should people go to check you out?
So if you want to check out the dashboard, you can go to www.stat-check.com, and our YouTube is www.youtube.com/statcheck, I believe.
/C/statcheck, probably, Nathan.
Probably. Can you tell that I'm not the person who does this on our show? I think all the custom
URLs have a C in them, including ours. So
that would make sense.
Yeah, I think it's for channel, would be my guess. So,
okay.
Yeah, so before we dive into the main event, which is what's doing well in 9.5 and why and what should you do about it, we have two things to do. The first of which is, Chuck, how you doing? What's going on in your life?
Well, I haven't slept much in the last 24 hours. There's been a lot of demon rules to look at. Other than that, I'm almost done.
Did you literally stay up all night reading demon rules? Is that what you're telling us?
Well, see, the leaks start at like 3 or 4 in the morning. So I had to do that, then took a nap, then I got up, watched people talk about what they meant, and then read through them all again. So yeah, sort of.
All right. What's going on other than that for you?
Mostly painting through a bunch of Necrons and getting ready for 3 GTs in a row.
On September. Consecutive weekends?
Yeah, just going all the way in. Should be fine.
Why don't you tell people what those tournaments are so we can plug them for people?
Yeah, if I knew the name of the first one, it's Jason's down in Hoquiam.
Harbor Heresy.
Harbor Heresy.
This is Harbor Heresy, not Tau Tipping, right? Yeah. We already did Tau Tipping this year.
Okay. And then I'm going out to Harvester at Gamers Haven.
Which
Bob's,
is the first tournament we ever covered on the show.
Yeah. And then off to Las Vegas.
Mitch is running that one. Okay.
And then I'm off to Las Vegas for a little team action.
Las Vegas teams. I'll be going to that and also doing Harbor Heresy, but I'm going to skip Harvester because I am not in a place in my life where 3 consecutive weekends of 40k is a good idea.
Yeah, well, I think there's going to be 3 consecutive weekends of sleeping after that. So it's not perfect, but it's what we're going to do.
All right. Mitch, what's going on with you in your life?
Oh, just getting by. No, just lots of personal stuff that's been taking up my time, and haven't had a lot of focus for 40K other than Tacticus, which has definitely been fun to play. That's the 40K Android and iPhone game that they have out now. It's a hex-based, turn-based combat game. So obviously, with BattleTech being my favorite universe, and I was like, oh, hello, hex-based combat, you say.
The mechanics are great. That game definitely has all the problems with gacha games.
Yes, it is. If you are vulnerable to the pressure of microtransactions, probably give it a pass. Give it a pass.
Save your money.
Yeah,
It's a standard lottery box, like loot crate kind of thing, where you put some money in and a box comes out, and then it shoots a random assortment of doodads at you with bright flashing colors.
And then you go, wow, that's all I got for my money. I'll never spend money again. And then a week later, you're like, well, what if I spent money now?
Well, there was that one time.
You have to view the timers as the hey, this game is telling you it doesn't want you to play it anymore. Respect that and move on.
I played the Star Wars version of that style of game for like a year. And I had to basically tell myself, this is a game that I play when I wake up in the morning for a half an hour, and then in the evening for an hour. And that's all the playing of this game I do. Like, I can only play the twice a day when all the timers are up. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Yeah, Tacticus is great. And if you would like to play with us, there's a Best in Tabletop guild in Tacticus, and there's like 10 of us from our Discord and show in there. If you can guess who Mr. Imperium is. It's definitely not me.
No.
Anything else going on, Mitch? My wife and Mitch's girlfriend had dinner last night. So I actually have that's the only time I get personal life updates from Mitch. The rest, Mitch and I just talk about nerd stuff. So I actually had a full update on what's going on in Mitch's life last night.
Yeah, no, that's
it. Lisa mentioned you might be moving out to buy Jason. Maybe.
No, nothing to mention, but yeah.
Okay. All right, fine. What do I have going on? I do some content. Yeah, I do some content. That's a lot of what I do. And then I play a lot of video games.
You do a lot of very small content now.
What's that?
You do a lot of very small content.
I do a lot of small content. So a lot of my life this last week was that 2 of my kids are playing tackle football, and both of them needed to go to and from practice at different times of the day. And so each day I have been leaving the house 4 times at very different times from each other to go get kids and take them back. And the whole time I'm doing it, I'm like, why do parents agree to this? This is dumb. Why is this a thing that parents do? I mean, I love my children, but this much? So anyways, that's what I've been doing this last week. We've been getting requests for short form content for longer than Best in Tabletop has been a network. And I kept trying to get a bunch of people organized to do it. And then I thought, well, what if I just did it with Chris, our producer? And so I made silly stuff first because in truth, I would rather make you laugh than inform you about 40K. It turns out I think I'm funny and my friends think I'm funny. And then many of the rest of you are like, yeah, he's okay. So me being funny is maybe not what everybody was looking for. The feedback we mostly got was the occasional funny is great, but could you talk about 40K and share your expertise? So disappointing, but we pivoted to that and we rebranded the thing the Daily Bit because it's a daily thing you get from Bit. And I thought I would just share that every Monday, that content is what to watch out for from the network that week, which is I think very helpful because we do have a lot of different shows doing different things. And then this week, Tuesday through Friday, is going to be Better Human, Better Gamer. I'm gonna each of the contents this week we'll be talking about the episodes of the show we've done where we talk about how to be the best person you can and how that translates to winning at 40K. And I'm going to take each of the topics that we covered in that over the many months that we did it, and I'm going to do 3 to 5 minutes on each one. So that should be hopefully something that people really, really want. Let's see. Fred Fortman says, yes, yesterday baseball was at 2, football at 2:45, and soccer at 4:30. The most important thing is to have a comfortable folding chair. Oh, you watch them practice? No. No, that's not what's up. I did go to my 11-year-old's first tackle football game yesterday, which was adorable. They basically all just run into a ball where the ball is, because there's not a lot of passing game. It's just a lot of 11-year-olds in pads, like minions, into each other. It's great. Anywho, so we've been making short form content. You can find it on the YouTube. It's called The Daily Bit. You can subscribe to see those. They've been really fun. Tyler Bortel released a thing where he tried to make his current tournament Tyranids list in the 40K app. And that is really entertaining content. So go watch that for sure. So Nathan, other than playing 40K, what have you been doing?
So I've transitioned from my graduate student role into a postdoc position. So I'm really busy with acclimating to my new postdoctoral position in a lab in Evanston, which is slightly outside of Chicago, where I do no longer 3D print organs. I do drug discovery stuff now, which is going to disappoint lots of people who are hoping that I would
sounds way
print them
cooler than
organs.
this.
But
so drug discovery,
all science.
Do you just like pour things into a vial and then drink it and see what it does? Like, that's very much what that sounds like to me.
So that would be a way better. No, it would not. Actually, so I'm like,
check out how big my beard is now.
I've been working really hard on hair growth promotion drugs. No, I work mostly in ovarian cancer, and then I work in ALS research. So what I do for drug discovery type work is I look at the spatial arrangement of proteins inside of organs. So we're looking at creating 3-dimensional maps of where different proteins are in organs and how we can use those in association with structures in organs to target those for drug development purposes.
Okay. That makes
So I
sense.
spend a lot of time in a basement staring at a lot of big machines that hum a lot. And then if people have listened to a couple episodes of the Stat Chick Show where I've recorded from my lab, you can hear the machines whistling. Somebody thought there was a bird trapped in my lab the first time they heard it, but it is in fact just an NMR whistling at me every 30 seconds.
It's good.
That sounds terrible.
I think any sort of notification that goes off every 30 seconds is definitely doing its job.
Yeah.
No one ignores
that. It's releasing like air pressure from liquid nitrogen. So it just does it regularly.
Right.
But there used to apparently be 2 of them, and they were off of each other, but they would gradually approach each other until they were aligned temporarily and then move away from each other again. And so
an elliptical orbit, basically.
Yeah. So the people who were in there before me were like, it was the worst, because you'd be really happy for like 3 days when they were basically lined up with each other, and then it would just mess with your brain as they slowly got further apart.
Gosh. So my first big person job, I worked for a software company that only had 4 employees, and the office that I was in was where all the servers were. And we deployed to a lot of different environments, and virtual machines weren't really as popular then as they are now. So I worked in the room with, I think it was 18 servers. And one of them was like one of those big HP ones. It's like half the size of a Ford Escort. And the room was not air conditioned enough. So in addition to the loud fan noise, it was like 85, 90 degrees a year round in the office. And they called my office Tahiti. I personally did not like being hot 100% of the time at work. That was not.
I understand.
So
everywhere you go and everything you do, just be hot.
Yeah, it's like, I love how knee pit sweat is part of my job. That's great. That's really what I'm looking for. Okay,
for us,
let's talk
the
about
opposite problem, by the way. So they set the temperature really low because of all the machines constantly venting heat. So my office is in the basement next to the machines. And so the temperature set is 55 degrees. So my office, because it doesn't have a bunch of machines in it, is 55 to 60 degrees all the time. So it's just slightly chilly.
Okay.
All the time.
Chuck is all excited. That's where he wants to work.
I have that in my house now, so I'm good.
Okay. All right. Why don't we talk about 40K? Because that's what we're here to do.
Oh yeah, it's a pretty good game.
I mean, it's fun. It's at a good place. I did our content yesterday on the Daily Bit was me telling people to go to tournaments. So clearly I'm happy about 40K right now. Before we talk about what's good, I would like to hear from Chuck about demons, because I don't know that much. And he's been looking at demons nonstop for the past while. So obviously we're not going to do a full codex review. That's not what we do on this show. So let's talk about your basic opinions. Do you want to do it by greater God?
I'm going to do an overall, because I think the overall is actually more important than each individual god. Then I'll give us an idea of how each god uses that.
All right, cool.
First off, they have what I think is the best deep strike rules in the game. The ability to come in within 6 of some characters, the ability to come in within your leadership distance to you and have minus leadership auras, the ability to deep strike within 3 of you in your own deployment zone. Like, there's a lot of different ways that I can get close to you. What's that called?
Well, first of all, I think somebody called me on Discord, which was very distracting. So Josh Bagwell just gave us our first super chat in the history of the network. So I have to.
Whoa! Wait! I think we're supposed to say, thank you, Josh. Super chats are a great way to support the network.
Yes, that's right. So anytime someone is going to give us money, we're going to interrupt what people are talking about and acknowledge them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's better, 3 great unclean ones or 3 soul grinders in the new book reviews? Are those things both terrible in the book?
No, I think the soul grinders are probably the correct answer here. Okay. Because once you've done 3 great unclean ones, you've spent half of your army on something that can't get out of your deployment zone.
Can soul grinders get out of your deployment zone now that they come with 150 by 100 millimeter bases?
Now, I just told you we have the best deep strike army in the game. Those bad boys are going to land 6 inches from your opponent, shoot something, and charge them. They're not going to leave your deployment zone. They're never going to be there to begin with.
Do they bypass the standard 25% or 50% restriction on deep striking?
It doesn't say anything about that one way or the other, so I'm going to assume 50% is the rule, and that you still have to do that. Okay. But theoretically, no. I don't know, but I assume yes. I haven't doubled into that. I'm just assuming the answer is half. But even at half, you can put a lot in hiding. So I actually think the soul grinders have some play. They're also like just chunky. I know that Josh is asking about Nurgle. So a soul grinder from Nurgle is a toughness 9, 16 wound model with a 4-up save in shooting and range that can't be changed. That model is never going away. And if you drop 3 and charge your opponent in the same turn, you're done, right? You're gonna have to punch to death. But anyway, let's get back to since I was interrupted by super chats. Like we have all the time.
How about Anthony making fun of Nathan? Is that worthy of interrupting?
No.
Okay, then continue on.
That's just another day.
That's par for the course, really.
Yeah, not unless there's some money behind it.
Yeah. If you want to super chat us, Anthony, I will make fun of Nathan with you. Go ahead, Chuck.
So, with that deep strike ability, really, we've taken everything that made Genestealer Cult cool, and like now just doing it better than them. Also, we're doing it for free. We don't have to pay.
A low bar to be doing it better than Genestealer Cult.
Hey, look, I'll take it as one of my army-wide rules.
That's my favorite not good enough codex, guys. Come on now.
The other thing I mentioned about that is we have an aura of 6 inches of -1 leadership all the time, and making combat attrition tests harder. So it's like, this is great. We're just, sometimes people are just going to run away more often with us, which is fantastic benefit. And then I also mentioned the saves. Having invuln saves all the time that aren't invuln saves, so they can't be taken away. It's pretty great, right? Like you have units that you will very much be able to understand what they're going to be like, what to expect from them. The problem is your opponents will also be able to understand exactly what to expect from them on a regular basis. It's hard to flex into being more durable.
Do they understand the points on that, you think? Do you think GW understands how to do point costs for that? I think that
would be me question. Assuming I understand enough to comment that they did a good job. And I think they probably know more about the book than I do at this point. But the points on everything are definitely more condensed. The units are more deadly. So I think there's definitely something happening there. I haven't experienced it. But I am excited about like what I can put in a list, what I'm going to be shooting at people and what I'm going to leave behind. So I think there's a lot there. So let's go through the gods. We'll start with the best one, Zeech. He's got flamers. Flamers are just way too few points. We're talking about a T4, 3 wound, 4 up, or 3 up, 5 up, I believe, saves. So against shooting, it's 3 up all the time.
6 up.
6 up, yeah. You just don't want to get in combat. Good news is you have flamers on that whole unit that shoot D6 plus 3 times each. So if somebody does charge you, they're going to take that for 1 CP on Overwatch, and then they get to fight you.
If only you had those hobbied up already, Chuck.
Yeah, actually, I have all 3 squads of 9, and now they're down to 3 to 6. So I have an extra 9 just chilling, just in case.
Go make some chariots out of them. That's what you should do. Just go build
those
some of those
two.
flamer chariots. Oh, darn.
I have the entire collection of what used to be the maximum amount of Zeech demons you could have. So I'm over demoned right now in that regard. But in addition to that, I feel like their Lord of Change is really good. The Zeech psychic tree is bonkers. It has some of the most damaging powers in the game, which is nice. I'm glad we finally got ahead of Eldar. That wasn't a thing we were good at before.
Definitely.
I think in addition to that, that's the thing with Zeech is they all have this like 3 up versus shooting, but then like 5s and 6 ups versus close combat. So you're definitely playing a game of close range firefights where you're hoping to clear enough that your opponent won't get a significant charge back into you, because that could hurt quite a bit. But then you start mixing with other gods, and then those guys get in between you and them, and I think you're in great shape. Then we'll go to
So you don't have to play one god?
No.
Okay.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. The only place where you really want to think about playing one god is if you have a detachment that is all one god. You get access to more parts of the Warp Storm table, which I didn't talk about at all, and it's actually pretty important. Beginning of the turn, you roll some dice. You get about 4 points that you get to spend on different benefits at different points in the game. It's essentially you get a random number of command points and a different section of a whole different set of stratagems. But all those stratagems are basically army-wide. But as you get into specific gods, they're obviously specific to that god. So there's a lot of benefit to playing mono god. But you can also, like I'm doing, I have one detachment that is mixed, and then one detachment that is all that one god, so I can get access to the things. Then our Bellicor is a supreme commander and does have all 4 gods. So if you really just want to open it all up, you can make him your warlord and go to town that way.
Okay.
So let's talk Khorne. Khorne smashes real good.
Shocking.
Yeah, it actually sort of is. It's what they did in the fluff before, but now they're going to try doing it in the game.
It's the biggest glow up, I think, between editions is definitely Khorne.
Yes. I think in particular, all of their things just hit more. They all get more attacks. One of their Warp Storm table things is +1 attack for all your Khorne units. It's bonkers when you consider what like a massed bloodletter charge can do to you. And then they also have Devout Push?
Yeah, they have a 6-inch normal move.
Yeah, 6-inch normal move during a fight phase. You do have to be able to see somebody to use it, which I think is a difference from Devout Push.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be like maybe a little more clever about it, but also just like making up difference in space is great. Then we go into Nurgle, who is, I think we were talking about this before we got started. It's like the stat check army. You're going to put a bunch of really fat plague bearers and plague bearers on drones on the table. They're all going to be OBSEC. When they're not OBSEC, you're going to give them OBSEC. You're going to give them double OBSEC. You're going to swap things to OBSEC during your command phase. You're going to get a 45 on primary. It's really more about how much primary you can steal from your opponent. I think you add a good secondary game to that, and you hope that your opponent isn't efficient at killing you, which they probably shouldn't be. You're pretty tough, but you're not doing a lot of damage. So that's the thing. And then lastly is Slaanesh. I think Slaanesh is kind of what it was before. You're like, here's a bunch of keepers. I think the Infernal Raptress is your super secret play. They are warp tethers or whatnot. So you can deep strike within 6 of them and still charge people. So you can hide them in your backfield, and then they launch out 9 plus d6 inches, and then you can drop your keeper secrets within 6 of them and then charge something. So when it's dangerous to have your keepers on the board, they can hide in deep strike and then come out and fight something. And then fiends are amazing. We're having a whole conversation about demonettes compared to possessed. The fact that you're even getting compared to possessed should suggest that you're pretty good. And then, OBSEC, these little 10-man units that can be launched into combats do some damage and then have 10 OBSEC models on your opponent's objective. That's going to flip the primary in your favor pretty repeatedly, and that's your mandatory troop choice. So no sad there, right?
Yeah. How did the Demon book do on the on GW secondary lottery?
It's the same as it was in Nephilim. So they have a really good battlefield supremacy where they have to just be in table quarters and have more units in table quarters than you, and then be at the center at the end of your turn to get points. So that's your 15. And they have like a better banners, but not like, in some situations. So you're like sometimes banners, sometimes that. And then they're good at psychic sectors, obviously. So unless you're Khorne. And then you still have all of your choices of like assassinate, big game, and no prisoners. So I feel like you have a pretty good. You're not Necron Sisters good, but you're fine, and you're an aggressive army trying to take the primary. So I think that's overall a good mission or good plan overall.
Do you think they're going to get mixed with CSM at all?
I've been trying to figure it out. They don't bring anything CSM needs. My opinion is CSM needs long range firepower. You can get 2 soul grinders into a CSM list. And at that point, you've spent almost as much as you would on 3 Helverins and a similar amount of CP. So just like make the better choice. There's nothing in my opinion, there's nothing in the Chaos faction that shoots even half as good for the points that the War Dog Helverins do. So you can't touch it. I have been shifting a couple into Thousand Suns, mostly to get access to the really good Zeech psychics to go with the other psychics, because they have another power that can target a character. So you get into a space where like it's less of like, I might be able to kill a character, and more like, can I kill 2? But I'm definitely getting 1, so that feels great. Someone
says 500 points of drones in Death Guard.
Yeah, I think that would be fine because that's actually really good, I think, because the Death Guard need that movement and those drones go fast. If you do that and then throw in, I think it's Sloppity Bilepiper to give them OBSEC, like that's a fine unit to have around.
Plus you get to say Sloppity Bilepiper every game.
Yeah, several times actually. Which is every command phase at least.
That's an advantage.
You get to say things like, well, my drones are going to get Sloppity. Mm-hmm. This objective is mine. Or it's the Scrivener. One of the two.
Spoilpox Scrivener. I also like his name.
So yeah, I think
Nurgle's got the orc vehicle name like thing going for him, where they have all the most interesting names. Like, sure, can have Skulltaker in Khorne, but you don't have Sloppity Bilepiper in every faction.
I also think there's probably a Slaanesh Chariot list where you're just like, I have all of these things. You can't kill all of them, and they punch and they move really fast.
Somewhere, Paul just like his ears perked up.
Oh, he knows.
I know, but like just every time someone says it, like, yeah.
He gets a chill in his spine. Are we talking about Slaanesh?
Yeah, I presume that he'll be unhappy because that's just how he prefers to be with his faction.
Oh, yeah. Well, also he's the most practiced person with the old book. It means he has to unlearn the most stuff because this book is not related to the old book. This is a whole new thing. It's actually way more related to, like, I think the 7th or 6th edition one.
So you might YOLO to this and take this to tournaments instead of the CSM. So instead of Bile, which you're practiced with, you might YOLO to demons and take them to these 3 tournaments?
Yeah, I haven't decided.
Okay.
Thankfully, the first 2 are... I'm just going to have a good time, so like I can bring them and then do that. I'm hoping to find like one night I can play at least one game, and I feel like I learn a lot in one game, so that would give me a better chance.
All right. Demons will be legal at Harvester.
Yep. So, and they're legal at
Las Vegas teams too.
And the other one, like, I'm so sorry, Harbor Heresy.
Yeah.
So I think I could play them all if I want. It's just a matter of...
This isn't the Vulcan Roast?
No, it's Harbor Heresy.
Oh, yeah, Vulcan Roast is July.
Yeah.
Yeah. He has so many; it's hard to keep track.
No, it's true.
So I'm pretty excited about them overall. I think they are going to be very hard to digest to start with. The deep striking benefits and building your army around different plans based on what you want to deep strike, based on who you're facing, and then remembering all of your stuff. There's a ton of stratagems. You got to use your warp storm table points correctly. Like, it's going to be a complicated. Like, this is somebody who's really smart who also puts in a lot of time here is going to get a lot out of this book, whether they're good or not. Like, they're one of those ones where, like, when demon books, if this book is bad or C tier or whatever, you're still going to worry when somebody shows up with it, because if they're really good at it, they're going to catch you out and sneak a win off you. So you have to, like, you kind of need to know what they can do.
Mm-hmm. And everybody's going to need stuff that can either get charged or stuff that can screen.
Yeah.
Those are going to be the options. You're not going to be able to be like, I took this elite army with no trash in it, and I'm just going to stand on the line here. And the chaos is going to be like, well, be a shame if my whole army charged into you on the second turn.
I'm just going to go ahead and charge that with a bloodthirster and attack it 20 times. How's that?
Yep.
I wolf and say yay.
Yeah. We're both going to die.
Yeah. Blood for the blood god. Let's do it.
All right, let's move to our main topic.
Yeah.
So a question we get a lot is, how do you know what's good and what to do about it? Is kind of a general question that we get. Lots of questions that basically mean that. So when 9.5 first happened, we, for many weeks on this show and on this week, said, hey, we don't really have a meta right now. Like, everything's winning. There's not really an S tier. And now we're far enough in, we've got some good data that we thought it'd be good to talk through the things that are performing well and why. And then we'll talk a bit about what to do against those factions, because there's nothing in the game right now that is impossible to beat. So, or even ridiculously hard to beat. There's really good armies, but there's options in every case. Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to do this conversation, I thought it'd be good to add data to it. And so Nathan's here to kind of tell us, forget what you think is good. Here's what math says. So I know there's several different ways to rank what's good, Nathan. And we were talking last night a little bit about how you think there's a more hybrid approach than just win rate. So could you talk about how you like to think of it as what's good?
Sure. So a lot of people use win rate. It's very sensitive to fluctuations week to week, because there aren't necessarily, not every faction is going to get a lot of games played per week. So win rate is a very sensitive statistic. So I typically prefer either TWIP, or what we use at StatCheck is just overrepresentation. So we use top fours as our overrep. And it's basically comparison of how many people are making it into the top 10 and then into the top 4, and then how their faction, how that representation of faction compares to their representation in the whole of the player base for that week. So say you have a faction that's like 10% and they make up 20% of the top 4 positions. They are 2 times more represented in top 4s than they should be. And usually once you see something around 2 or higher, that's when you start thinking there's a problem. Or on the other end, less than 1, around 0.5 or so, you start to get concerned in the other direction that a faction is just performing pretty poorly.
So you're focused on measuring what good players are winning with. Yes. So you avoid the thing that a lot of people talk about with, like, Space Marines. Their win percentage goes up slower because it's just a more popular faction. So people who are there for the fun of it are sort of dragging that number down. Whereas, like, more complicated or less popular armies that get good suddenly have giant win percentages.
Yep. So this kind of avoids some of those problems. And we've started to do some more breakdowns on the website too, where we use veteran versus casual players. We're probably going to have to come up with a better version than casual, but newcomer might be a good one. So GT, people who've been to 1 or more GTs are what we consider veteran players for the purposes of statistics tracking. And then people who've never been to a GT event or haven't been to a GT event in our data set are considered new players.
Okay.
And so we've started to break down win rates for factions based on those as well. So we've started kind of producing a bunch of hybrid approaches to kind of break down where experienced players are performing really well. And if a faction is doing really well just in the hands of a veteran set of players and not doing well in the hands of newer players, indicating that there's perhaps a higher performance ceiling. I'm going to use that term incorrectly at least once, and somebody's going to get in my DMs and be like, Nathan, you got our video game term wrong.
The ceiling and the floor and all those words that don't mean anything anymore.
Just ruined.
Yeah. So what Cliff has done, and he curates our meta dashboard, is he's started to create a bunch of tabs for different data representations and analyses, so people can kind of look at a bunch of different things. So we created a quadrant of win rate of veteran by casual, which I think is kind of neat. And we can talk about a little bit later, and you can find all this at stat-check.com. But for the purposes of today's show, I wanted to talk a little bit about faction win rate trends first, because I think it produces the best visualization of it, and we're still working on how to visualize TWIP over time, or not TWIP, but over.
Before you do that, Nathan, what is CRS score? Because I'm at stat check right now, and I clicked on faction ranking because that's what I want to do, and it says CRS score.
So we've created and so we have a pure ELO ranking system, and then we use faction performance to offset the ELO, and what that ends up becoming the CRS score. So it's essentially a player's performance offset by how well the faction that they play primarily is doing. So if somebody's playing mostly Tyranids, they have a modifier that changes how their score looks. So if you're playing a faction that's not doing well, like Astra Militarum, your wins essentially mean more points for ELO because you have to play comparatively harder than a Tyranids player needs to play.
Okay.
So you're trying to actually measure the skill of the player.
Yes. And then the faction ranking system kind of does it a little bit in the opposite direction. So it takes an overall faction performance and then bases it then further off how player skill, so their ELO ranking, offsets the faction ranking that way.
Okay. But that's not the list we should use for this conversation, it sounds like.
No. So we're kind of creating a new version of determining who the best players are currently in the meta. And so you can look at the CRS if you want to look at an ELO offset by faction performance. So if people jump factions a lot, or if they play primarily only high performing factions, then their scores are typically a little bit lower on that than usual.
Okay.
It's just a different approach to ranking player performance that we're trying at the podcast and at the website.
Okay.
But I can show you, see if I can get this to work correctly.
You should just be able to share your screen.
Yeah. Let's do this. Maximize this. We don't. All right. So this is win rate over time for just Nephilim. And this is all of the factions represented by their little icons, along with trend lines connecting their icons. And so this is the release of Nephilim over here. And so what you can see is that there's a really big spread of factions, and it kind of progresses. And then there's a huge spread here where we have Eldari at 100%. So we'll ignore some of the lines. The thickness of the lines also shows you how much that faction is being played week to week. So a thinner line indicates fewer games played. And what we've seen over the course of Nephilim in the course of 9.5 is essentially what we've seen is this kind of narrowing of faction performance over time.
Mm-hmm.
We do still see outliers like Astra Militarum at an 80% win rate for August 7th. But what we're starting to see is this packing of win rates closer to where we would consider the balance area. So 45 to 55, which is this green area, is what we'd consider like perfect balance. That's where we would like to see all of the factions for the purposes of balance. And then yellow on either end is 55 to 60, and then 45 to 40. And that's where we're kind of in areas of concern. And then anything that's outside of that is greatly out of whack as far as game balance goes. So one of the nice things about Nephilim is that we've started to see kind of a curtailing of as many out of whack, like high performing, out of balance factions, and kind of a narrowing of this distribution of win rates, which is kind of nice.
Which is great. Yeah.
Yep. So we're starting to see a game that's a lot more balanced than it was before.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean we don't still have haves and have-nots, because we do still have those. So I'm going to stop sharing real quick. And if you want to play around with this and like select your faction and track it, you can go to our website at statcheck.com.
Cool. So who does the math say is the best army?
So I don't think this will be too surprising for people to hear that Tyranids are still the best overall faction in the game at the moment. They have a summed win rate of about 59.5, and last weekend they won 4 out of 9 GT-sized events that we tracked, and they had an over-rep of close to 3, 2.96, which indicates that they're doing very well. So Tyranids are probably the top performing faction at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. So let's talk about Tyranids for a minute. I'm the Tyranid expert on the show, even though I haven't played them a lot in 9th edition. I've played them some. So Tyranids is funny because when they got hit, like right before Charity Hammer, when what we're calling 9.5, when they got hit with like 4 barrels, not even both barrels. Like they got hit from every angle, and GW tried to stop what they were doing and what they were going to do next, and gave them bad secondary play. And the problem with all of that is that their book is amazing. So yes, their secondaries are not as good as everybody else's. Well, not everybody else's, but they're below. I would say they are average or below average secondaries. But secondary game is really what I mean. But the thing about Tyranids is Leviathan Warriors, real good. Like Raveners, real good. Harpies, real good. Flyrant with Reaper of Obliterax, real good. Like there are just Zonethropes, really good. Neurothrop, really good. Like there's just a bunch of stuff that is just has amazing data sheets and are, in the case of Tyranid Warriors and Raveners, undercosted, frankly. Still. And so a lot of like when we're doing our this week prep each week, when we're looking at who won, I've kind of started summarizing the Leviathan list because the Leviathan list is actually pretty steady out there. It has as many warriors as they can. It's got a bunch of psychics. It's got a flyer with the Reaper. It's got some zones. And that's, some people take Harpies, some people don't. Like that's the thing that's winning for the most part. But I think what shows the real strength of that book is that we had a Behemoth list that did well last weekend. We had a Jormonger list that did well last weekend. Alex is still on Kraken. We have a friend locally who's done well with Kronos. So like, I think when you know a book is too good is when you see high performance from many different kinds of lists from that book. I think that's actually that's a warning sign that I think is significant. Mm-hmm. What do you do about it? I think you smash them. Like, I think you can beat them by playing better secondary game if you are one of the winners of the secondary lottery that we went through. If you are Necrons, I think you can beat them on points. If you are any of the stand in the middle of the table and score 1 million secondary armies, that's pretty good against them if you can be durable enough.
If you can survive the warriors.
Yeah, right? That's what I mean, if you can be durable enough. Yeah. But my approach to Tyranids is to kill them with guns and punching. Mm-hmm. I think that aggressive play is actually what they don't want now because of the number of nerfs they've had. I think if you have profiles that kill transhuman Tyranid warriors well, and you can play aggressive with them, I think that they will struggle. What do you guys think, though? Chuck, you've played against Tyranids a lot in 9th edition. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so one of the things I try to make sure I have is a good source of damage for. Like that's, if you can have either something that's just regularly shooting at damage 4, obviously grab that. You probably wanted it anyway. But close combat's a little easier place. Oftentimes you can get a character with a damage 3 and pop it to a 4 with a relic or something. You want to look for that. I think it's worthwhile. Beyond that, then you're looking at damage 2s, right? Or just mass 1 if that's what your codex does. Mm-hmm. What's really important about that is the transhuman, right? And then if my experience, like I was playing a lot with Bile, I could win with Bile because they could trade unfavorably, and that's hard for them. But their carnifexes are rough for me. So if somebody mixes carnifexes in, suddenly I have to pay more attention to what's going on with them, right? Make sure I don't get into a bad combat where he kills me and then I don't actually kill him back, and then the carnifex gets another. Like he flips the trading scenario on me. Mm-hmm. I also think you need to be very careful about your psychics. I often, as a chaos player, end up building psychic secondaries as a plan, and then having to bail on them because you can't psychic secondaries into Tyranids.
Right.
They're gonna mess them up. So
that's
make sure you're ready for that.
Of the army. because a lot of armies, like Eldar, need to take a psychic secondary to have a good secondary.
So you have to have a plan of like, what are you going to do in the Tyranids come? Because you also, I get one of my backups is always just like, I'll grab banners. It's like, well, that's not good. Their basic bruiser that they're going to try to swarm the board with happens to have OBSEC. Like banners isn't going to work out.
Right. Nathan, you played a bunch of Tyranids. What do you think of this?
So I mean, for me, like the hardest game I've played in 9.5 so far has been into Necrons, because you're basically. So the Tyranid game in Necrons is you have to play hyper aggressive, like way more so than you even normally would, because you're basically like, I have to table my opponent by turn 3 or the game is over. And we'll probably talk a little bit about that more in like a few minutes when we talk
in
about
literally
Necrons.
Minutes.
Yeah, but I think that is accurate to say that if you get into the face of a Tyranid's army, and if you can get through, if you have decent AP and decent damage weapons, you'll just break apart Tyranid warriors, even with transhuman.
Yeah.
Tyranid warriors still only have a 4-up save. They have a 5-up invulnerable on the go turn. If somebody uses warp shielding on them, -1 damage is annoying. But if you put enough pressure on a Tyranid's list, it will also break. You can only buff 1 9-man of warriors at a time. If you're playing multiple 9-mans of warriors, I've started moving into playing a more mortal wound heavy list over time. So,
yeah, for sure. By the way, I jotted down what I think the S tier is, and I didn't look at data for it, so I'm correct so far.
okay,
I picked Tyranids. Tyranids is not my top for me, and I don't think Tyranids is the best thing in the game. I understand that data is saying that it is.
they've been consistently the
So
best.
what you're saying, Colin, is that Tyranids have the lowest floor.
I think the problem is that they have the widest walls.
Yeah,
I think that we need a new.
Yeah, but that makes them handy accessible. Like that,
They've got a really powerful shed out back. Is that what?
Yeah,
It's a whole different building.
I think the
They have a
modifier to the. I think there's some modifiers to the win rate that are happening here. This is not. I'm not going to say things that I've done research on and the data supports. This is just my thought. I think how good Tyranids have been since Crusher has made a lot of people have Tyranid armies that didn't before. And I think that that the people that are playing Leviathan in particular are very practiced at this point. So despite the fact that they got nerfed, they're still trashing people with a list that basically operates incredibly similar to the way that it did before. And so there's some momentum there. Yeah. I suspect we're about to talk about Necrons, but just to or Harlequins. The thing with Necrons is, if you, I think Necrons will build momentum over the next few weeks because Necrons are a level of good that's ridiculous, but that wasn't obvious to a lot of people immediately. And we didn't have a lot of Necron players already going to tournaments. Like, there's a difference between Tyranids are still good, and I already have this Tyranid army I'm taking to the tournament. And, oh my God, Necrons are good now. I used to be a Necron player. Let me do some hobby. Like, those are two different things. So I think that my prediction is that Tyranids will not be if we had Nathan on in like 3 or 4 weeks, my prediction is that Tyranids won't be the top anymore. But they'll still be S tier because I still think that they're that good. That's just my thought on Tyranids versus the field.
Yep. The reason that they're at the top right now is primarily because of maintained performance rather than anything else at this point. So they've basically been around 55 to 60% win rate
forever
since the start of Nephilim.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're just tracking.
Who's next?
So, the next faction is actually we're going by win rate because this is just the easiest way to sort this. And Harlequins will be next at a 57.6% maintained since the start of Nephilim. And if we go into overrep, we can see that the Harlequins are basically around a 2. So Harlequins are a relatively low representation faction since the heydays of when they had like a nearly 80% win rate. And they've dropped back down to still higher than they used to be at about 3%. I remember back in 8th when there were maybe 5 or 6 Harlequin players at that for most. And now Harlequins are making up about 3% of the meta on average. And they're sitting around a 2. They peaked at around a 3 recently in overrep. So they're still doing very well. So they're still getting into top 4 position. They're not closing as much as they used to. So they're not winning as many GTs, but they are still getting into winning position quite often.
So that book is dead, though, right? Like,
Oh, yeah,
they
totally
nerfed it,
dead.
and that army died, I thought.
They definitely 100% nerfed the right thing, and definitely 100% didn't nerf the wrong sub-faction.
Yeah,
Definitely
poor Dark. So Harlequins are crazy. First of all, at the beginning of 9th edition, before the Eldar Codex was even out, Harlequins were great. And these rules are better than those rules. Just so we're level setting. This is better rules than they had when they were winning a lot at the very beginning. Harlequins have speed, and speed wins. And it's not a lot more complicated than that. They have a good they have one really, really strong secondary that they can take, deadly performance. And having one really good faction secondary is a big boon, because it makes the secondary game significantly easier. The secondary game, picking secondaries at the beginning of the game, is actually where I think the game is the most imbalanced right now. It's my biggest criticism of 40K at the moment, but that's a topic for another day. So you end up with Harlequins that have a slightly better secondary game than the field. They're way faster than the field. And there's a lot of armies, especially close combat armies, that can't play into a game where you're faster than they are. Sisters hate it. As an Eldar player, I will tell you, Sisters, as good as they are, hate playing against fast close combat armies that are faster than them. Eldar hate it as well. Harlequins are just the epitome of, I'm annoyingly durable, I'm fast, I have great stratagems, and I have a pretty good secondary game between psychic secondaries and deadly performance. I don't play mono Harlequins anymore. I did some when they were at their height of their brokenness, when everybody was taking 9 of the gunboats. Void Weavers, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. I just don't enjoy the play style as much as the other stuff I'm doing. But I think Harlequins are obviously one of the best armies in the game right now. The one other thing I wanted to mention is something we saw in 8th edition when Double Spear Ynnari was the most broken. There was a time where Double Spear Ynnari had like a 70% win rate, but most people didn't understand why they were good because the amount of people playing them was very small. Mm-hmm. There is a thing in 40K that happens where a faction isn't one of the most popular model lines, which Harlequins really aren't, despite how cool they are, or the army is a little bit hard to play, where you get a small subset of people playing it that are actually boosting the win rate because you don't have what you call the newcomers playing the faction. This is something that I call the Space Marine paradox. We've talked about it on the show before. Space Marines in general always have a worse win rate than their book actually is, than the quality of their actual book.
I think we can really call it the Space Wolf paradox, because the Space Wolf Codex has 2 times in a row the win rate has gone down when new rules have come out, because all of the old players who played Space Wolves have come to give it a try again. And even though the rules aren't necessarily as bad as I think it hit like 37% or something stupid for 1 point. It bounced back after those people left because they weren't having success.
One of the things that I do want to say, just quickly to your point, Colin, is that Harlequins specifically do have a 63% win rate when you look at just GT experienced folks, as compared to a 55% with new folks into GT environments. So you do see in a lot of factions, you do just see that difference in them, but they are one of the factions where you definitely see a higher performance for veterans as compared to.
It's a hard to play kind of faction, which is good, because honestly, you get more rewarding out of that if you're willing to put up with the beginning part where you kind of get stomped while you try to figure out what you're doing.
And their slightly above average performance doesn't actually bother me because of that. I think that the army is hard enough to play that I feel like I get to have a game, right, when I play against Harlequins. I think so. Just to finish my thoughts, so people understand where I was coming from. If you have a faction that hobbyists really love, it will in general have more people that don't care about how they're performing at the tournament in the data. And Space Marines are notorious for that, because every tournament you go to, you have either newcomers or people that are hardcore hobbyists, and they're more likely to be playing Space Marines than Harlequins. That's the general point I'm trying to make. I've been to a lot of tournaments. The people that don't care about how they're doing there are usually not Harlequin players. they are usually on Space Marines, is really where they normally are. So that has to be considered in the data. It doesn't make the data not interesting or not valid. It just is an interesting thing to think about. And Double Spare Ynnari in 8th edition had this problem because it was very complicated. And so you had an incredibly small number of people playing it. Nanavati, and Manny and Naden and not that I'm as good as any of those people, but myself, like we had these people in pockets around the world winning with it like crazy, but there were large portions of the meta that didn't see it at all. So just that's the point I was trying to make. Any other thoughts about Harlequins, guys?
I think it's telling. It's the same. They're like Tyranid warriors. Their muscle, they're guys that are going to go out and do damage, are also OBSEC. Getting to like launch things in, kill something, and then be like, and tag this objective off you, right? Like that's easily worth 4 points in a game when your main tool is also OBSEC.
Oh yeah, mm-hmm.
And I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, they take a lot of OBSEC in those lists for sure.
Yeah,
OBSEC, fast moving OBSEC in boats, 10-man beat stick OBSEC standing on the table. Yeah, for sure.
If you're taking something and it happens to be OBSEC, that's a lot different than taking something because it's OBSEC. Right.
Sure.
And I think that really helps.
Yeah. Okay. Mitch, Nathan, thoughts about Harlequins before we move on?
No.
Okay.
I think
Speaking of OBSEC,
my greatest disappointment actually is just that Harlequins aren't as much of a melee faction as they used to be. Now it's more, if you look at some of the newer lists that have been coming out, back to kind of Soaring Spite at the end of 8th, where it's 8 people in boats shooting pistols out as they drive by.
Yeah.
So you just have
I like that
two
feeling though.
two Neuros confusions shooting out the windows of the Star Weaver as they go zipping on by.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that just makes me want to give all of those boats ground effects. Like
The problem, my main criticism of that's actually I'm with Mitch. That would be super cool. Harlequins and troops getting coffee. Harlequins and boats getting coffee. Okay, so that's a great name for those lists. My big criticism of Harlequins is that their troops don't punch hard in combat. And that's solved by Ynnari, which is why a big part of why I'm playing Ynnari.
Yep.
Anywho.
Yeah, that's also how you beat Harlequins, I think, is you just, if you can catch them, they will die.
Yes. Uh-huh. They be fragile.
Just get out there with your net and try to catch that Harlequin boat.
Yeah.
Just try to catch the objectives. Don't try to catch the army.
Yeah.
Right.
If you
That's
can charge
also
the
fair.
objectives, you'll catch something.
Yeah.
You're good. Be patient.
So our third faction
I'm two of 3 for what the top 3 are so far.
is Sisters of Battle, or Adeptus Sororitas. We're at a 56.2 summed win rate over the course of Nephilim, and they also have stayed kind of right around a 2 for overrep basically since the start of Nephilim.
Okay.
So this last week they had a 2.0, or this last week they had a, where did they go? 2.39, so 2.5 almost times more represented, and it kind of hangs around 2 to 2.5 for this faction as well. And that's kind of a theme that you'll see with most of the factions that are performing really well, is that they're around a 2 to 2.5 for the most part. And so yeah, Sisters real good. In fact, 2 times probably better than they should be. Maybe.
I have strong opinions on this. I do, but I'm not the Imperium guy. Does Mitch want to say anything about Sisters first? Are you too far out of them?
Sisters are just Imperial Necrons, it kind of feels like.
Okay, sure. I'm with you so far.
Like I don't have a ton of thoughts on them. Like the lists that are winning are fine and cool. They don't speak to me. They're not something I'm like excited to play.
Well, they're all roughly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like that's just it. Like they're playing to their secondaries, and the miracle dice give them a type of consistency that allows them to really perform. And I think that the miracle dice are probably on top of obviously the secondaries are that extra bit that is really making them rise up statistically, because you can just consistently know you're going to make something happen. And that can deliver a game to you probably at least once an event.
Mm-hmm.
I'll add on to that. They also have the ability to give their close combat missiles OBSEC.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I'm a big fan of that.
Fight on Death also good. Fight on Death is a big problem for a lot of what's good in 40K right now.
Yeah, solves a lot of bad situations.
I think Sisters are weird in this list because I've been reading all of the lists that that get top 3 and 4 at tournaments for the past month and a half. And Sisters don't win events very much right now. They mostly get second, third, and fourth, is what I've seen. Maybe I'm wrong. Nathan might correct me, but that's what it feels like. I think Sisters are the ultimate X and 1 faction right now because as good as they are, their secondaries are amazing. They hit really hard. They can be durable. They have a lot of good tricks. They've got jank. They punch really hard because everybody plays Bloody Rose. But in addition to all that, they have matchups that are just awful. They just have, like, Necrons is terrible for them. Eldar played well is terrible for them. They are not a true S tier army because they have matchups that are just so awful for them. I played the John Lennon's list into Necrons a bunch, trying to make it work. And even John admitted that is just like a super uphill battle. So yeah, really good secondaries, really powerful army, but I think they're going to drop off over time because I think there's just stuff in the meta that eats them. I think Harlequins eat them, for example. I haven't ever seen that game, but just based on what I know about Sisters, they do not want to play against an army that's faster than them. That has especially one that has a ton of strength 6 low AP shooting, right?
I mean, Sisters' bad matchups right now.
What's that, Nathan?
Sisters' bad matchups right now are essentially Necrons and Harlequins.
Okay.
If we remove things that are like fringe to 50. So Harlequins are about 43% win rate for the Sisters faction. Necrons is 38%.
Ooh.
And they have about a 50-50 into Tyranids and into Craftworld Eldar.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have significantly big problems into Double Catan. That's a big part of what we're saying.
Yep. So
How do you deal with Sisters? I guess we said that. You go faster than them. And you kill them, and you kill them back and push them off their defend the shrine objective.
Yep. The couple of games I've played in one, I've just moved my entire army onto their shrine. They have to come there anyway. Like, you're going to take some hits, but like, just make sure you're getting your hits back in. Which is easier because I'm playing Bile, so like it's just natural. But that space is going to be full of Sisters. Fight it.
Yeah, for sure. I want Sisters to be S tier. I just, having played them a bunch into their bad matchups, I just think that it's really rough for them. I think that if we're making an S tier and you say what the thing we defined S tier as before was you have a better than 50% chance into an equal skill level player on any mission or table. Now obviously bowling ball world changes everything, so we're presuming competent terrain in this, but I think that Necrons have that, and I presume we're talking about them next, but I guess Nathan will tell me here in a second.
Oh, sure, we'll talk about it in a second. So there's one thing that I do want to say real quick, because there's a reason we don't use GT wins as a statistic.
Yeah,
is because there's way too much that goes into it.
Sure.
From just like, there's also an incredibly small number of things on a week-to-week basis. Like, even your most aggressive week, GT wins is usually 10 to 12.
Right. It's not enough.
At most 15. It's not enough data to really track.
And you can be the best player in your meta too.
Yeah, it's why I picked top 4 instead for GT tracking, is because it's a little bit more representative of maybe somebody hits one bad matchup or hits one bad mission. Because arguably I don't think there's any faction that has no bad missions or bad matchups at this point in the game.
Sure.
Even Tyranids have bad matchups.
If you win 4 games, that last game is going to be somebody who's just as competent or more competent than you. Right? Yep. Like,
I guess I was trying to say that I think Sisters are more susceptible to bad matchups than Necrons and Tyranids and Harlequins. That's all I was really trying to say.
That's fair.
So who's next?
Our next faction by win rate is actually Drukhari.
Oh, hilarious. This is shocking to me.
I don't think Drukhari are an S tier faction. And we don't really need to talk about them, but by win rate, they're at 55.5. They are still placing reasonably well, but the player base has kind of fallen off. They just don't have the player base anymore. They're at about a 2 to 2.5% meta representation at this point. They do have really good weeks where they have a good meta rep, where they have around a 2 for over rep. But for the most part, they're hanging around a 1 to a 1.5. So they're not doing anything, blowing anybody out of the water anymore.
So if you're still playing Necron or Drukhari, it's probably because you really know what you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah, I've flatly I don't think I've seen a Drukhari army in 5 tournaments. Like, not even seen them. Like, not necessarily not played them, but like just not even seen them there.
They're still very smashy, and they have good secondaries. I heard the Prey is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it got nerfed a little bit, but it's still good. And also, their characters are still the best punchy characters for the points in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all
they do have
stories.
By far the lowest number of players and games played of the 5 factions in the top 5.
Okay. Well, now I kind of want to play some Drukhari just for fun. So maybe
there were some really interesting lists that were played in the WTC singles, and then also in the WTC for Drukhari that are just kind of neat to look at.
Seth Oster says he still has Drukhari PTSD.
It's mostly my fault. I think Drezar is in his nightmares now.
Drazar's living rent free in Seth's brain. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm really saying.
That's
It's
great.
the Master of Blades has free rent.
Yeah.
So
I think he's got a lot of that. A lot of places he can stop in.
we're at number 5 now. Do we finally get to talk about Necrons?
We do finally get to talk about
okay.
Necrons.
Right.
I know. So I want to say something about Necrons before we talk about it. So Necrons and Sisters both have really wide distributions of new players versus casual players. So Necrons in particular have a 12% win percentage difference between casual players who are at 49% and veteran players who are at 61%. And then Sisters are at a 61 and a 50. This is where we start seeing some of the widening for some factions, and I think it's because of some fallibility in those factions, but it is good to know. Necrons overall have a 52.6. Oh boy, did I misread that? 53.6. Sorry. Okay. And they have done astoundingly well. So their meta representation has increased significantly. They are, who'd have thought? They're up to net Tyranid levels and have surpassed Tyranids on multiple weekends as being the second most represented faction outside of the Space Marine Codex. And they're hanging out at around a 2 to a 3 most weeks for overrepresentation. So there have been a couple weeks where they've done just astoundingly well and just blown everybody out. But there are also a couple weeks where they've done quite poorly. So it averages out to around like a 1.5 to a 2 again for that for that overrepresentation. There's a couple weeks of 3, but there's also a couple weeks of 0.8 in there where they're roughly balanced.
Well, Chuck, you want to talk about why Necrons are good?
Well, you see, they get all the points. And you have to kill them before turn 3 if they're going to not get all the points.
They regularly take 3 secondaries from their book.
Yeah. And
that is a type of flex that tells you that someone has won the secondary lottery and you have not.
They don't even consider, like, you have to basically, if you put like a bunch of Chaos Knights into them, even then I think they would still just take theirs. Like, there's just no reason to not just take your core 3. And like, I don't know, in my experiences playing them, I'm like, okay, well, I get 13 on turn 1 and 13 on turn 2 and 13 on turn 3. Okay, well, I'll probably struggle out the last couple of points here, maybe, or don't, whatever. And then the rest of the army is OBSEC. So it's going to be out there. It's going to be playing the primary. So do that.
It's also way faster than people think it is.
Oh, yeah.
It is simply not a slow army. Like, I think Naj has the best list, but I'm partial because he's on the network. But Naj's list that he won the GT with 2 weeks ago was double Catan and then 3 units of Scorpex and 3 units of Tomb Blades and the Silent King, basically. There's some other stuff in there, but that's
2 Catan's pretty important.
Yeah, but like, the 2 Catans basically means that Eldar and Harlequins and Sisters all hate you. And then in addition to that, you've got 3 units of Scorpex that are impossibly hard to kill, very durable, and by the way, they move like 10 before charging. If your punchy stuff moves 10, that's not slow. You're not the fastest army, but that's not slow.
Right. Actually,
And OBSEC.
Yes,
I run
right.
this a lot with
And
possessed,
pregame move. Don't forget pregame move.
where I move the possessed out, and it's like, well, I can charge that whole objective. That's fast enough. If you go there, I charge you. If you don't get points.
Yeah, it's like how D-Cannon's range I thought was going to be this big problem, and it's not because everybody's playing close because the armies play close to each other now in 40K.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. Like if I'm fine shooting you at 24, then you're probably fine moving 10 and charging, right? Like, so yeah, close range is the name of the game now. I think what people are missing on Necrons is that as good as their secondaries are, the Silent King getting core was really big. He's a lot more efficient in his shooting than he was before, in my experience. Like he's got better rerolls than he ever had before. Basically, the Silent King and Double Catan is a core that's just really, really good. In my testing, believe Necrons are. I think that list is the best list. That's of the things we've talked about. Forget the data. Like this is me personally playing at the table and watching things perform. I think Necrons are the best thing, just because their secondaries are the best of all the secondaries we've talked about. They're better than Sisters. They're better than Space Marines. They're better than Drukhari. They're better than Harlequins. They have the best secondaries, and they have a durable army that punches well that says, you have to come stop me. And that means the way I think of that is they're still playing with To the Last, and the rest of us don't have it anymore. Like To the Last broke the game because it became entirely too obvious to everyone in the competitive scene that taking 3 expensive things that are durable and hard to kill and hiding them and then telling your opponent to come to you is the way 40K is played. Most of us can't do that anymore, so we're all like fighting each other, and Necrons are like, no, bro, I'm still doing that.
You have to make the approach.
I'm still over here, and I'm going to score 100 points. Liam Hackett scored, I think, 100 points in 4 of his rounds at WTC, and then 99 points in 2 of his rounds.
He dropped 2 points, yeah.
Yeah, something completely insane like that. He won the singles event at WTC with Necrons, and
he
then,
really humiliated Naj
scorer.
by only dropping 2 instead of 3. That's really what we're getting at here.
Yeah, he should feel bad about himself. But he won the singles event at WTC, which is hard. And then he scored the most points of anyone at WTC. That's hard as well. I think that in the right hands, Necrons are a real problem for the game. But good news, most Necron players are not Liam Hackett. So
I would also say that most Necron armies don't get to play on WTC terrain.
Yes, also true.
So what I think personally of Necrons is that there are 4 secondaries in a trench coat.
Yes.
Because I don't think I've seen a Necron game where I haven't seen a Necron player essentially tabled by the end of it, but they've won. Like there's no Necrons left. There's no Necrons left, but they've won because they've still scored 100 points.
I played a lot of Disciples Bellicor with the pink horror blob that spawns into 150 dudes or whatever. And that's how that worked as well. It's when you table me, not if. And when you table me determines whether we win, whether I win or you win. And if you bring weapons that are efficient in killing them and the speed to get to them and the ability to interact with them, you can do it.
And arguably the most important keyword in your matchup into Necrons is the fly keyword. Because nobody is going to stop you from getting past screens at that point. Like what happened to several players who played against Liam Hackett was he hemmed them in with scarabs, and then a lot of armies don't have fly, and so you can't get over scarabs. You're just stuck.
Here, fight these scarabs while I hold up more objectives than you.
Yeah, fight these scarabs while I score 45 secondary points in 3 turns.
It's pretty rough.
And I don't think that that's great for the game, right? Like, I don't think that's a way an army should perform when nobody else is performing that way. Nobody else is scoring secondaries at the efficiency or speed that Necrons are. But at the same time, Necrons haven't been good for a really long time, so I have a hard time holding it against them. And even with this, they're still only got a 53% win rate. So like the thing that I'm saying is the S tier that I think is such a problem is winning a little bit over half of their games. Like it's not actually that scary, but I think in the wrong hands. Like I think that if LVO was tomorrow, we would have a disproportionate number of Necrons in the top 8 going into the finals. That's what I'm trying to say about Necrons right now. I think if you include player skill, they're a real problem.
I think I like it. I think it's interesting that it's not just like the game has been for so long. Are you a good close combat army? Are you a good shooting army? Now it's a good close combat, are you good shooting, or are you good at missions? I think that's interesting. Maybe there's some need for some balance here or something. But I think it's good that they've added a new vector of how an army can be good.
That is a very valid point. You know, there's a lot of the old philosophy, you know, of mission design was, you know, you can either stand on a thing or you can kill a thing. Like that is what you can do.
Yeah.
And being like, okay, so now it's like there are different ways you can kill things, and that matters. And but there's also the mission side is can be a very key component that you're just running off of.
A variety of ways of standing on things now.
Yeah,
I think that's a good idea. Is this the best execution? Or maybe not. I don't know. But like, I'm glad the idea is starting to be explored. I'm hoping for more of that.
Yeah.
It probably just needs a couple secondary tweaks.
I agree with that.
Just get rid of one of the 4.
Maybe it should take you. Maybe you shouldn't just have better herd the prey, where you score 2 points for holding your deployment zone.
I think in a game where most of the missions they put you in a table quarter to start with, that's probably a pretty good secondary.
Yeah. Wow. It's like I will always score probably 10. Probably.
So I think that's the top 5, right? We did 5. Okay. So I think that this is interesting, right? This is a good conversation. If you are a tournament player, I think that we need to complete this with the final exercise, which I didn't think we were going to do, and I just came up with, and I'm pleased with it. The final exercise, I think, is to think about what you do on the faction that you want to take to a tournament to deal with those 5 armies. I think that the really valuable data is if those are the 5 things that are winning the most and are the most represented in relation to that. I don't know how to word that correctly, Nathan.
That's fine.
I fumbled on it a little bit, but like we're not just looking at win rate, we're also looking at how overpopulated the tournament is with those things. So like these are the 5 things other than Drukhari, really. But these are the 4 things and Drukhari that you need to be able to deal with, right? You need to know how to handle. So Chuck, let's look at Bile, because you've played Bile a lot. Talk about how you think of the Bile matchup into each of those 4.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. All of these put me on plan A, which is charge a clock, right? Like I am aggressively going to take portions of the table. I'm going to be threatening for 1 turn, and then I'm going to be up in your army in the next, right? So I really like all of these popular matchups. I think I've done pretty well into them. I've made some mistakes, but like I always feel like I'm in these games. What's really interesting about this is there's not a lot of shooting in any of these lists.
Right.
Like there's a Silent King and some Catan coming at you and the shooting some Meltas at you. But like with Bile, I'm like, here's 10 possessed. Like none of that is going to kill the 10 possessed, right?
Well,
You're
Harlequins have a lot
it.
of shooting. But
What's that?
Harlequins have a lot of shooting. But yeah.
Right. But they're not going to they're not picking up the kind of bodies that I'm putting on the table. So I'm still going to do combat.
Yep.
So they actually don't threaten my Bile list. I'm more worried about outlier matchups where people are like, I'm Kronos Tyranids, or I've got Imperial Knights, that kind of thing. So I'm really happy playing the path, right? Up into here. I feel like I've built something that fits into this space really well and performs well because I have all the pieces that we've talked about, right? I don't have OBSEC, but I will kill you. And if you charge into me with your OBSEC to OBSEC missile my point, I'm going to kill you back when you get here because I'm going to fight on death. So now your main trick isn't working, right? And so that extra points that they're used to getting, they're not getting anymore when they play against me.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that to me, I feel very good into that pile because I think I have the tools to press on the people who are doing the secondary game. Like I can push the Necrons and say, like, you might not get turn 3 if you don't, take some action.
Yeah.
And then Sisters is hilarious. Like They have enough close combat that that will do damage to me, but then they will die. Like a possessed easily picks up several sisters on his own. So it's gross, and I can literally just push them all onto their objective, whatever one the shrine is, and call it good.
Mm-hmm. Nathan, you've been playing NIDS. What do you think of you into these ST? If this is the top tier, what do you think?
So I don't mind playing Harlequins or Sisters, actually, for the most part, especially as I've moved more towards a more mortal wound heavy list over time. So I've been playing far more like psychic mind bullet stuff as of late, and neither Sisters nor Harlequins like either of those things. Necrons are probably the matchup that I dread the most, primarily because it's just a race.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything goes wrong, so the most recent practice game that I had with Necrons as my opponent, I charged a Harpy on the last turn of the game into the Silent King, who had 3 wounds left, and I had to kill him with the Harpy in order to win the game. And I had 1 CP, and I used it on the Chitin stratagem and rolled a 6 and did 3 mortal wounds, and he died.
So
and I was like,
very like, roll the dice, 2 wins.
And I was like,
that's like a kamikaze Harpy flying directly into the Silent King is what that is.
Do you find in that game that if the Necron player goes first and gets that round of scoring and move blocking before you go, that it has a pretty significant impact?
It's real bad because I mean, I also don't play the most aggressive Tyranids list on Earth. Like, I play kind of like a glacier just moving across the field with it. But into traditional, like, Tyranid warriors even, like, if somebody gets out and gets on all the objectives and gets a screen in front of those Tyranid warriors, they have to fight through it. Because they're not jumping over it. So you're kind of stuck. And so you have to play... If you don't get first turn, you need to play even more aggressively. And basically, your turn 1 has to be your go turn because you need to push everything out.
Yeah, but because you're going second, you have to focus on if you can take some primary off of them, because you're going to get your old primary. Where it turns the other way if you go second. I feel less comfortable. I prefer to go first against Necrons, but it's interesting.
I like to go second because I want to smash them, so they should get closer to me. That'd be great.
You can reach them. They can come up and touch all the objectives on the far side of the objective on the first turn, and I can't know that I'm going to make it into them.
Oh, fair. So Mitch is our TO extraordinaire and not playing as much Comp 40K. I don't want to ignore you though, Mitch. Do you have an army that you're thinking about, and have you thought about these matchups?
Yeah, I've been designing a Space Wolves list with a couple 2 to 3 Helverns.
Okay.
It's basically so in the latest points update, for whatever reason, grav guns are free for Sky Claws. So you can take 3 of them, and you can take 3 of them in a 5. So they're blood claws with jump packs.
Okay, sure.
It's literally no one's watching the Sky Claws, so they just went over and went, "This is ours now," and ran off with it.
Yeah. So, but you can get 3 grav guns in a 5-man squad for 90 points, and then you throw in a power fist for another 5. And so 95 points. They have a ton of attacks. They move 12. They hit on 3s. They can heroically intervene. They do all these different things. They're very cheap. So you take 3 of those squads. You take maximum number of Fenrisian and Cyber Wolves because they're, again, incredibly cheap units that can... my entire strategy for all of these armies is, okay, if you need the first 3 turn, if you win by turn 3, I need to win by turn 3. And Space Wolves have an access to secondaries that are so just, hey, if I'm charging you and I'm killing you, I'm doing my job. And so it's all based around having enough units and waves to just keep doing that to you for 3 or 4 turns, and then I'll have nothing left, but I'll have 90 plus points.
Yeah.
So, I recently tied a game with a Space Wolves player. And I think that if he had been a little less aggressive, he would have won it. But he literally ran out of things that could engage with me.
Yep, that's the whole strategy, is to have enough. And then you have the Helverns to create pressure so that your opponent can't just run away from you, and to take down anything that's big. And then that that list has 3 squads of 6-man Wolfen squads, 3 hammers, 3 claws. It gives you that right mix of durability and volume, and yeah, it's really interesting what you can do now. Guys like Ragnar Blackmane is now a really interesting proposition, like since Armor of Contempt, because you're like, oh, I can just be AP 5 and I'm going to do 16 wounds. Like all of a sudden a Terminator unit is like, oh, well, that's actually a problem for me. I don't like that. And it's just 110 point dude doing it. And he gets to do it first every time. So yeah, there's stuff like that that's interesting. Another example is Arjak Rockfist. He has a 3-up invul and Armor of Contempt, so that's in Terminator armor, so that's pretty funny. And -1 damage. So he just kind of laughs at everything and is like, I'm just going to be a pain in your ass and throw my hammer at you.
One of the things I like into that is Space Wolves are very good at landing their blows. So when you get into things like Tyranid Warriors, where you can't really have much of an impact on how much you wound because they are going to be transhuman, it's nice to know that you're bringing as many attacks to what's going to be a big old 4-up party as possible to try to push it in your favor.
Well, and if you are going to try and improve that, you're using like lightning claws, right?
Yeah, there's also lightning claws.
Yeah, and the other thing that's really interesting now is the Armor of Contempt on the dreadnoughts. You have a lot of dreadnought options now that those claws can be AP 3, flat 3 damage, rerolling to wound, strength like I think it's like 10 or something silly. Those all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, that just picks up Terminators. And it can still have a gun and still function, and it has Armor of Contempt. There's some interesting dreadnought lists that are also they're not optimal, but man, you're gonna have a great time.
Yeah.
You actually mentioned that a couple times, and I think it's really interesting. Terminators, Armor of Contempt, definitely a massive part of the game. Definitely something to be thinking about when you're making your list.
Yep.
Interestingly, not on this list of top performing armies.
To me, though, if you can't deal with that, you're building an army that's going to have another problem, right?
That's the gatekeeper, right? They're in the middle, being like, if you can't get past that, you don't get to play with the Tyranids over there.
If you can't deal with that and knights, then you don't really have a game anyway.
Yeah, you're just going to get that. You're going to get that. You're going to go 4-1 because you're going to hit that at some point during the tournament. They're populous enough that that's important to know.
And I want to say, when you go into the numbers, there are still a number of factions just right below that top tier that, if they ever got points or rules adjustments, could compete into the S tier pretty easily.
Sure.
And though, like, Custodes are there, even though people keep complaining that Custodies are no longer good, Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights are also both there. And the Chaos Space Marines have gone up in win rate every single week.
Yeah, that also makes sense.
I think AdMech is being slept on pretty hard right now too.
I think the reason AdMech is being slept on is that it's terrible to play as the army.
Yeah,
I have multiple friends that have AdMech armies that are just like, no, it's not fun. Hank brought it over and we played several games with it, and he's like, the rules are just awful. Like, it's not that they're bad, they're just so finicky and silly. He was just like, I just don't like playing this anymore.
I suspect if you got enough reps into the point where it wasn't taxing for your brain anymore, it would become fun. But that's like a lot of pain to get to a point where it's great.
And it's a horde army, which isn't the most fun to play either. So,
speaking of which,
the last faction in there is Blood Angels, by the way.
Yeah,
there is a Marine faction that's just like right outside.
The fastest Terminators, those are good.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting with demons entering the world because they have the opposite of Armor of Contempt, right? So if you're pushing for lots of AP, you're paying for something the demons just literally don't care, right? But then if you have volume, the demons really care, right? Like a brick of 10 Terminators or Stormbolters is like, I'm building lists and I'm looking at them like, I got to get to T5. I can't just be T4 out there with these guys shooting at me. I'll just disappear.
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of what I'm thinking about with AdMech, is that with that Radium stratagem where I just wound you on 4s to hit, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to just take 60 shots.
Yeah. Here's 30 wounds. Bye.
Yeah, that is a definite problem for demons, and
Tyranid Warriors.
Tyranid Warriors.
Also, like, interestingly enough, with like the trans-hitman stuff, you're like, well, the 4s are what count anyway.
Yeah, and you can just run in with the Skitarii army of renown. You can just run a bunch of them that they ignore blast completely. They give you -1 toughness in combat, and then everything else is going to be Skitarii close combat that deals mortal wounds and is AP3 and is just like, hi, we're so glad to meet you. We're going to advance and charge right over here. This is going to be great. Don't worry.
They go real far every time they move. They're one of those units that you get like Gene Stealer fast. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Why are they over here?
And then they're like, I'm going to give. Now they have 6 attacks and their strength 8. How did that happen? Well, I
Just
spent
trust
5
me.
CP. It's a thing.
Also, you fight last.
Yeah.
Die.
But yeah, I think that they're being slept on pretty hard, and they're that's. I actually have my codex somewhere around here because they've started to pique my interest again as they are neglected.
Yeah, part of the problem with AdMech is they've just been competitively abandoned.
Yeah,
Like their meta representation and total number of players has cratered.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that book is well written for people to play it. I think it's a mess. That's what I'm
It's
trying to
definitely one
say.
of those ones where it's like, decide what you're going to do with your turn before you start it.
Yep.
So it teaches good habits, but if you make a mistake or something doesn't go well, your plan can go pretty far off. So like you have to have a lot of like plan your whole turn, but also backup plans for every contingency of something that could fail.
it's an
a lot.
execution army. Like you have to execute every time, every turn.
Yeah,
If you
I think you have to
don't,
build
it
a lot
crumbles.
of like routines where you're like, okay, I'm going to do this set of things, and so I know what I'm doing, and it's a lot of work.
But on the upside, you can cheat a lot without anyone knowing.
Turns out you can do that with any army.
I got to tell you, when I'm playing against AdMech, they always have the buffs that they need where they need them, just magically. There's never a situation where they either don't have CP because they have all these magical floating CP that don't make any sense. And then
the free ones.
that like everybody tracks differently and doesn't make a ton of sense. I just know that if AdMech needs CP, they probably have them.
There are 2 layers
and
of
if
that
they need
too.
to fall back and shoot, they have it. Just presume that the character is somewhere nearby.
Well, because they have 3 sources of it.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
I think that they're an army that's actually been hampered so much by the CP change that it's going to require a fundamental, like, ground up adjustment. Because they were so CP heavy and relic heavy and warlord trait heavy, where you could just load up and you did have your buffs wherever you wanted because you had 2 sources of everything almost, which is what I liked about it was the redundancy. But that's definitely going to have to change. I think they're going to become much more of a rapier. Like, hey, I've got all of these abilities that can cut right through you as long as I strike perfectly. If I don't, I'm probably going to shatter.
Yeah. So before we wrap up, Nathan, what's the worst 3 armies on your list?
So I'm going to show you an image. Actually, I'll share my screen.
One of them.
And I'm going to see if you can find them. This is my favorite. This is my favorite image so far that I've found. So can you find the 2 worst performing factions on this list?
Where are the Imperial Fists? Show them to me.
Where are those fists?
Oh, look at this.
Oh, look at them.
it's
They
all
aren't
fist.
even. They're not even on
Look.
the screen.
They're fists.
The
Bro,
fists.
we got this.
Yeah, Imperial Fists and Crimson Fists are by far like the worst 2 sub factions. Imperial Fists are at like a 20, and Crimson Fists are also at a 20. If we jump up to non-Space
Bless the
Marines,
true believers that those even exist.
Yeah, it really is. I want to tell you that those armies are gorgeous.
I was going to say they're going to be immaculate.
Probably.
Those Imperial Fist and Crimson Fist armies that are still performing, they are amazing looking. Everyone's named. Like that's a good army.
the
real
lowest
army.
performing faction though that has like not a Space Marine or power armor, not a Space Marine associated is Astra Militarum still. They're suffering from just not having a book. Mechanicus
and are still getting some high performances lately.
Yeah, so there's a funny thing that happens in overrep sometimes if a faction has almost no meta representation but does like okay. And 1 week Astra Militarum had a 10.4 for meta rep because they had like 1 top 4, but they had like a 0.4% meta representation.
So it's really how good did that one guy do?
Yeah, that one guy did real great. And so
he represented
10.
himself really well.
He did. He did 10 times better
He
than
did
he
not
used to
represent
do.
Imperial Guard well. Not accurately, at least.
God, just bring me the book. I'm ready. Mitch, are you ready? I'm ready.
Yep.
Mitch isn't ready.
I'm ready for Votan actually more than for Guard even, and I've been painting Guard.
Land
I
train.
just am-
Give me a land train.
It's true. I just want like some berserkers and some weird guns with silly names like that High Las cannon. That just amuses a part of me so deeply.
I want to hand paint Oh Hi Mark on them. Oh hi Mark.
I did whine at the Facebook community folks for Warhammer community because their mining suits didn't have helmets, and they said that they will in fact have helmets. It's like, that's an OSHA violation. They're like, don't worry, they have head protection.
They're dwarves. They head all the time. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Shrug it off.
All right. Well,
Is the
go ahead, Chuck.
on the far left upper one look like
oh, dang it. I will reshare so that we can do this again in 1 second.
It looked like Tyranids. I'm guessing it's probably Colts.
It's forces on the way far left.
Forces, yeah.
Side.
It's like
they don't have
the highest win percentage with the lowest representation. I'm just curious.
That's again, that's what we call the
McDougal right there.
McDougal, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a couple factions on there that are grayed out, whose meta participation is so low that they're just not statistically relevant.
Right.
And forces is one. They have
Which
like
makes sense.
2 or 3
Still funny.
players. But it is
How do you take the Tyranids book and give it better secondary play?
Give it another
Like, it's-
book.
Yeah, get the book that's good at mission play. Like,
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
Your
If,
book secondaries
if you
is
said
they're
we're
awful.
going to WTC and you have to be and you've got the Tyranids and GSC, I would absolutely play forces together if it were me. Like,
Yeah.
that's what McDougal's doing. There is TOs do rule it weird because there's weird wording on it, but whatever. We can talk about that another day.
Fucking
All right, so that's it. We went through the thing. Thank you, Nathan from StatCheck, for joining us, and thank you always to Chuck and Mitch. Believe it or not, guys, this is the completion of 112 of these.
It's so many.
Yeah. I don't know when the next significant number is. Like, I don't know if we celebrate primes or I
It's
don't.
113.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably
obviously 169.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that.
420.
187.
I would say the next time we cover Storm, since that's the first event we covered, I think that's the real anniversary.
And then that's the last episode, and it's called When We Went Out with a Storm. Is that?
Swept out in a storm.
Yeah.
We'll wait and say we got harvested.
Oh yeah, there you go. No, we're not ending the show. I'm just joking. So, all right, everybody. Hey, you guys know where to like and subscribe us. Again, we do have a merch store now, bestintabletop.com/store. You can also find additional content on our YouTube. Our YouTube now has subscriptions for both YouTube and Discord. So if you want to do both, there's a discounted rate that allows you to do both there on the YouTube page. So you can check that out if you'd like to support us. I will tell you that we are doing all of our effort to get as much content out as we can that's of quality because we want to grow this thing. And in order to do that, we need you guys to subscribe. So we're going to be doing a lot of effort to make sure that you guys are properly encouraged to support us is what's happening right now. We'll be back I don't know when we'll be back because Chuck's going to go to nonstop tournaments for the next month. So I don't know when we're going to record again.
Well, and week after next is Harvester.
3 weeks. One more weekend, and then Harbor Heresy, and then Harvester, and then Las Vegas teams.
Got it.
Which we will be at Las Vegas teams, and our team is Michael Tempe, Jesse Sell, Chuck, Alex McDougal, and myself.
Seems pretty good.
We are like the official grown-up team.
West Coast, Best Coast.
Yeah,
that's
we're West
really
Coasters that are like grown-ups with real jobs. So that's like what we are. Old people, most
Dad Coast.
Yeah, we'll be up at 7 in the morning every day.
Yeah,
ready to go.
We are gonna be so responsible about going to bed at the tournament.
Yeah.
You need some dad jokes for each table during each match. You just need a dad joke or two just ready to go for you.
Well, we'll be there, so yeah, we'll get it.
Have you met me, Nathan? Like I don't.
You guys all need to have fanny packs, but don't wear them across your chest like what's hip now. Wear them like fanny packs.
Yeah, what is that? It's like the bandolier, like they've got their ammo ready. Like that's weird.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I mean, either way, you guys wear them the other way and get the big dad tactical ones with like the webbing on the outside and a water bottle and a first aid kit.
That the more pockets
Cargo
your
shorts.
clothing have, the better you are doing.
Cargo shorts.
Of course, cargo shorts. That was implied.
I want cargo shorts. I got to figure something to put in all the pants so that they like bulk out on the sides.
just models or
stuff I'm
dice.
carrying with me.
Snacks.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's a good
Our,
idea.
our buddy
want a
Josh
warm gummy
Bagwell
bear?
has started wearing a leather pouch on his
I
belt.
warped them up with my body is not where you want your gummy bears.
I was just quoting the end of Ferris Bueller.
Just
Okay,
the
I'm gonna
worst,
be
a
more- I'm
half
gonna be more
melted Cliff
wholesome.
Bar.
I'm going to be more wholesome than that. Josh Bagwell's got a leather pouch that he wears on his belt that's got his like dice and his tape measure in it, and I always feel like it's got strong like fantasy adventurer vibes. Like he's going to throw out magic dust and throw it at me like pocket sand. Like I always think that's what's about.
Well, I've got the Carhartt shorts I've worn to tournaments forever have the little snap-on like area for like, and I can put all my templates and my tape measure, my little quick reference rules. It's the best. Like you got to be practical, guys. Don't forget your cart.
Yeah. What's the food that Napoleon Dynamite pushes into his pocket for later? Oh, it's Mexi fries. What are those things called?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Those will be good.
Hash
Don't worry
browns.
about it.
No, that's not hash browns. What are they called? What are the things called? Jesus.
Tater tots?
Tater tots. Thank you. I just love that he's taking tater tots with like no wrap, no like packaging of any kind, and just shoving them into his
The
pocket
pocket
to eat
is
later.
the packaging.
That
Yeah.
pocket
Why
will
it's
be
so
greasy
important
forever.
to de-lint before you go out, so that the food you put in is not gross.
So that you don't have linty tater tots from your pocket.
Yeah,
Well,
Okay.
it only happens with the first set of tater tots you put in there. Then it's nice. You don't worry about it.
the pro move is to actually put a plastic baggie in the pocket and have it lined already. So
Like saran wrap your pocket so that it's ready to, so it's easy clean pocket.
a pocket shield, you know.
When we're at
Colin,
tournaments and
in
I've got my hoodie on and I'm eating lunch, I notice sometimes in the next game when I put my hands in my pockets of my sweatshirt that there's crumbs that have trailed down me and
That's
gone
where
into
we're
my
in the
pockets.
podcast, guys. That's we've hit
That's
rock
why.
bottom.
It's why you
about
need
pockets.
a pocket protector.
I have a little pocket vacuum. I don't know about you guys. Just stick it
So
right
if you
in
guys
there.
ask me how I'm
People
doing
get
as a
really
tournament-
weirded out when there's like this coming from my pockets, but I just let them know I'm just cleaning out the debris from my lunch.
Woo, that idea sucks.
It can also blow.
If you guys come up to me and ask me how I'm doing at a tournament and I say crummy, I'm literally just talking about the food in my pockets. All right. So with that, we're going to stop for the week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll be back soon. Thanks for supporting the network and the show. We love y'all.
We
Bye now.
understand if after this last week
Bye.
you don't, though.
Yeah, it's reasonable.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.